Some memories linger like shadows, refusing to vanish, even in the face of death itself. In the case of the Pollock twins, two young girls seem to carry the memories of lives that they had never lived. Their story raises a chilling question: can memories transcend death? The story of the Pollock twins has haunted the collective imagination for over 6 decades. It begins, as many tragic tales do, with unimaginable loss. In May 1957, in the quiet town of Hexham, England, 11-year-old Joanna Pollock and her younger sister, 6-year-old Jacqueline, were struck by a car on their way to church, along with their friend, Anthony. Both girls died on scene, and their friend was killed while en route to the hospital. The driver, under the influence of drugs, had swerved into them intentionally in a fit of rage after losing custody of her own children. The loss of Joanna and Jacqueline left their parents, John and Florence Pollock, absolutely shattered. In their grief, a strange, lingering hope took root in John Pollock's mind. He became convinced, with a certainty that disturbed his wife, that his daughters would somehow return to them. John, a man with an unusual belief in reincarnation despite his family's Catholic faith, claimed that their daughters would be reborn into their family. Florence Pollock, struggling to process both her loss and her husband's conviction, dismissed this idea as a pure fantasy. Yet, just over a year later, in October of 1958, Florence gave birth to 2 twin girls, Jillian and Jennifer, being the first twins in their entire recorded family history. From the start, the twins were a mystery, one that would stir questions about the boundaries between life and death, and whether, perhaps, there are forces out there at play that we yet don't fully understand. Even as babies, the twins exhibited a few subtle, chilling signs that seemed to link them to their deceased sisters. Although they were identical twins, Jennifer bore a birthmark on her left hip that resembled a mark Jacqueline had in the same place. She also had a faint mark on her forehead that matched a scar from a fall that Jacqueline had taken. And as they grew, these physical signs were joined by behavior that unnerved their parents even more. The twins began asking for toys that belonged to Joanna and Jacqueline, toys that Florence had hidden away after the accident. The girls called the toys by the names that their late sisters had assigned, divided them up exactly as Joanna and Jacqueline had done, and spoke to them as if they remembered every detail. The family moved from Hexham to Whitley Bay shortly after the twins were born, but when they returned to their hometown a few years later, the twins displayed an unsettling familiarity with the places that they had never visited. As they walked through the town, they pointed out landmarks with eerie accuracy. The schools their sister had attended, the Hexham Abbey, even a playground their sisters had frequented. They walked through the streets as if they had lived there all along, as if they were remembering. These memories started to take a darker turn when the twins began to speak of the accident, a tragedy that they had never been told about. Florence once overheard them reenacting it in a play, with Jillian cradling Jennifer's head, saying in a low voice,
"The blood is coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you."
In another moment, Jillian pointed to Jennifer's forehead, noting,
"That's the mark you got when you fell on the bucket."
This recollection of an event was too close to an incident from Jacqueline's life, one that Jillian couldn't have known about. But it was the twins' reactions to cars that perhaps unnerved their parents the most. Though neither girl had ever been in an accident, both displayed an almost instinctive terror around moving vehicles. When a car engine revved in a nearby alley one day, they clung to each other, screaming,
"The car is coming to get us."
It was as though they were reliving the accident, feeling the impact of something that they had never physically experienced, but somehow seemed to remember. Despite her own skepticism, Florence began to wonder, were these children truly remembering lives that had been lost? Or was it simply the power of suggestion, perhaps hearing their parents discuss the accident through whispers when they thought the twins were out of earshot? Or perhaps their older brothers, of which they had 4 of, had planted the seed. Perhaps they had told the twins of their sister's fate. Some in the medical community, including researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson, found this case deeply compelling, suggesting it as evidence of reincarnation. Dr. Stevenson, who had interviewed the Pollocks and studied similar cases, noted the uncanny resemblance between the girls' behavior and their deceased sisters, describing a pattern that defied traditional explanation. By the time the twins reached 5 years old, however, the memories began to fade. Jillian and Jennifer gradually lost their instinctive knowledge of the past, their phobias, their inexplicable memories. They grew up, as children do, with only faint traces of what had once haunted their early years, but the mystery of the Pollock twins lingers, undisturbed, waiting in the shadows of science and faith. It is said that John Pollock rarely, if ever, visited Joanna and Jacqueline's grave, as in his mind, he had his daughters right there. For some, their story is a ghostly reminder of a life that may echo across lifetimes. To others, it is a tale of grief manifesting in ways that we cannot fully understand. But as long as there are questions, the Pollock twins' story will remain, casting a long, eerie shadow over the thin line between life and death, challenging our understanding of consciousness and what lies beyond. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see similar videos.